Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. And of course, I am Brigid Burke, and I run this business transition life coaching. And I'm doing these morning coffee sessions for those of you who don't join regularly, just to kind of give. I usually have a different theme that I talk about every day in connection with the work that I do, and just to give people an idea of where I'm coming from on different things. And I did want to mention sort of up front that I am at the moment looking to take on some new clients. So so Transition Life Coaching, check out the website, transitionlifecoaching.net, see the kind of work that I do. I work a lot with people who are who are in transition, but it doesn't have to be a major thing. A lot of times people who are coming to me are just people who are at a crossroads or trying to make certain decisions for themselves. Now, I don't make decisions for anybody. And I know I have a style for a lot of people that comes across as very sort of direct but it's not, but I don't, when I'm working one-to-one with people, I tend to be very mindful of where they are. If I see somebody who's really, really hurting or really in a certain state, obviously, you don't, even if the cards tell me something or I feel something where I think, well, this person may be holding on to something or this, that's not generally where I go because that's not really helpful to the person. I was talking last night with a friend from England who we were messaging back and forth, and we were talking about this one deck that we have both used, because we both work with, in our own ways, we work with feminine energy, but we also work with, I work, like I said, more in the Chthonic realm, like the dark energy, the dark feminine energy. And because that is the energy of usually wounding, rejection, betrayal, the kind of things that we are trying to bring to the surface and that are there to heal, but also the things that bring us the wisdom of life and so forth. And good morning. I do a lot around healing and healing work. With that, working a lot with the dark feminine kind of stuff. And my friend and I were talking about this deck that I remember I was in Avebury, I was in Elements of Avebury shop, which is a wonderful little shop there. And there was an oracle deck called the Dark Goddess Oracle. And of course, immediately you think, oh, okay. I remember the woman behind the counter who had said to me, she says, oh, this one's a bit intense, just so you know. And I thought, okay, well, how bad could it be? Well, I had the deck, and recently, actually, and I did a cleaning out of my decks here. I'm cleaning out a lot of stuff in my house, I think, as I've mentioned in the past week. And I ended up tossing that deck in the garbage. And no offense to the authors, because I know the authors are pretty well known, and they have a number of decks and so forth. But I just felt like the energy of that deck was way, way too harsh. It was like for each goddess that they mentioned, these goddesses have wonderful transformative aspects to them, and it was just like, oh, you're a narcissist, oh, you're this, oh, you're that, oh, you think you're special, oh, you're doing this behind some. It was literally all that kind of stuff in these cards, and I thought, this is like literally like the, why you're an a-hole kind of a deck, and I just thought this is not a helpful deck to anybody. Because that kind of criticism of people up front doesn't do anything. It doesn't. It doesn't help people. There used to be, I think, therapies. Was it the est therapy? I'm trying to remember what it was. It was some kind of a therapy back in the 70s where basically people would go in this room and whoever this person was who did this therapy would just stand there and scream at them. And to me, I'm like, there's something almost masochistic about it. It's like S&M therapy. Like, I'm going to yell at you and make you feel small until somehow that makes you feel better. And maybe there's a component of that to that. But I don't think that that's a particularly helpful thing. I think I have a personal objection to people associating that with dark goddess energy, because literally I think that just illustrates the problem. Everyone thinks dark goddess energy is, oh, it's manipulative, it's bitchy, it's this, it's that, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. It's not soft and cuddly, but at the same time, it's not necessarily that's not necessarily what that energy is about. That energy is usually about trying to help people see truth. It's usually about trying to bring clarity through to a situation. But everybody comes to truth at a different speed. So not everybody is, you just can't, the approach of just like slashing somebody with the knife when they come in is not generally the best approach to deal with people. And if people are dealing with it in a certain context, I mean, you have to be very careful about how you word things. When I used to work in a shop reading and doing charts and stuff like that, I remember we would have discussions among the different people who worked there. And there was, sometimes I know at least one of the readers was kind of like, you just want to be upfront with people and look at the cards and go, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And I said, yeah, but I wouldn't do that to somebody. I had clients where I knew, like, they were for, if they were, for example, let's just say there was a wedding on the table and I was seeing things that kind of let me think, I don't know if this is such a great idea to marry this person. That's in my head. I'm not saying that to them. And I'm like, okay, how do I convey to this person that they may need to reflect on this before they move ahead? And so it would just be, I would say, well, before the wedding, you guys may have some challenges that you have to settle, Or if you see that somebody, they're in a relationship and there's a case of, I really want this person to change. I don't even need cards to say that generally is not a good way to approach it. Like, this is broken, but I'm sure we'll fix it after we're married. It's like, probably not. So when there has been some kind of contention, there have been times in the past when I've done readings and said, like I'll see like a 4 of Pentacles and I'll be like, okay, this person is not going to change. So if if there's an aspect of them that bothers you, or you feel is disrespecting to you, or you feel makes you sad, or is somehow not right, then that I just want you to know that this is maybe a pattern, maybe it's an ancestral pattern, or like maybe their family's like that, their parent is like that, and their other parent is like that, and they're not going to, and they may not be the type of person who's going to kind of do that self-reflective work or whatever to want to change that. Sometimes even when we do self-reflective work, we still don't change, because you still really can't see it unless it's reflected back through another person. And that's kind of the reason that we have different modalities where people can, that's why people even go to readers. I mean, even putting aside people who want to know, I want to know the future outcome of this, which, as I've talked about, transition life coaching isn't so much about that. I mean, that does sometimes come up, but it's not, it might come up where somebody's looking at a situation and it may steer them, and it may suggest that it may go in one direction or another. But a lot of times people will go to readers because they want somebody to reflect back. They don't want to tell you anything about themselves. They want to see what's reflected back about them in the cards. And frequently that will happen. I would have people, people always come in, and people always have a demeanor when you come in for a reading. They know, because they either, like I said, there's either the skeptical or scared thing. I've talked about this in the past. And it's kind of the, either they think, they have to like put on a face like, okay, I'm not going to let you read me. And it's like, well, you need to kind of meet me halfway. You can't just lock me out completely, because the opening card will tell me this person doesn't want you to read them. It'll literally say it in the opening card. And I'm like, look, if you don't pay me money for something that you're trying to stop me from doing. That would be like saying, okay, I'm hiring a plumber to fix my sink, but when he shows up, I'm not going to let him in the house. And then I'm going to complain that my sink is still overflowing or whatever. You're not, if you're going to hire somebody for something, let them do the job. You don't have to believe in anything. I mean, you can just say, okay, I don't know what this person's going to tell me. I'm just open to whatever they say. And maybe some of it resonates, maybe some of it doesn't, because when you're looking at cards, if I don't get a clear message on something, sometimes I'll say, okay, sometimes I do have to ask, like, okay, are you married? Are you in a relationship? And I don't like to assume necessarily things about people. Like, if I see a marriage, I don't necessarily need to assume, for instance, that it's a marriage between a man and a woman. I don't want to always assume all those things out of the bat. And I think people ought to think that readers can just look at you and just know everything about you. And sometimes, yeah, you do get a flash of intuition where you'll say, oh, is this the case about you, or is this? But that doesn't mean you can read the person like, okay, I'm looking into you like you've got some written profile somewhere, and like an x-ray, I can see through you and see everything about you. There generally has to be a meeting halfway, because there's also people have boundaries, and those have to be respected. So yeah. So anyway, so when I work therapeutically with people, and I use the word therapeutically loosely, because I'm not an LCSW. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm very clear about that for very legal reasons. I'm very clear about that, because I don't want people to think that I'm representing myself as a counselor with that kind of degree. That said, I do have a background in psychology, and I do have a tremendous background in myth, symbol, and archetype, and I'm working with people through crisis, using symbol. Joseph Campbell had said a long time ago in the Power of Myth series, Bill Moyers, one of the very first questions he asked him in the series was, why myth? Why should anybody care? And Campbell said, well, he says, my first answer to that would be, if it doesn't do anything for you, then don't care. Then maybe, obviously you've gone on, you've lived your life, must be a good life, fine. Maybe you don't need this. But he says, however, I think with the proper introduction, you can recognize that you can get into it and recognize that it can provide a kind of roadmap or guide signs, a set of guide signs, not really a firm plan or guide, but guideposts, guide signs to kind of show you where you might be going next in your life, because your life tends to follow an archetypal kind of a pattern. And again, depending on all the other individual things about you will depend on how those archetypes manifest in your life. So there's not like a one size fits all, like everybody follows a developmental track that's exactly this way. It's not how it works. So, and of course I'm working within that structure. A lot of people don't, some people work very well in a standard therapy talk session. My sessions are largely talk, but they also include these different tools. If somebody comes to me, for instance, and talks about a family pattern or about things that are going on, if there's a lot around family, if that person hasn't done a chart with me, and like I said, I like doing the life assessment. I realize it's an expensive reading for a lot of people, but it's because I charge people for 3 hours for that reading. It usually takes me almost like 6 or more to kind of go through all the details and try to plot out a report for somebody so they can make sense of all of this information. And then I spend another hour discussing it with them on top of it. So this is what I do. And but again, there's a lot of people who maybe balk at the life assessment and are like, oh, I don't have that right now or whatever. And I said, sometimes if we don't do that, then during an individual session, I might be like, okay, in the next session, we're going to run your chart and we're going to look at it and try to see, because there's certain things I do look for in an astrology chart. I look for, where, like I said, where somebody is wounded. I look for where their Saturn is. I look for the Chiron Saturn. I look for Pluto. I look for some of the karmic things, but I also look at the Vedic chart too, which means I'm looking at what dasha they're in. I'm looking at whether or not they're in what they call Saraswati. I'm looking, depending on how old they are, certain subcharts are ones that we might want to look at there. So yeah, there's a lot of work that I do, but a lot of it is, I think the word that we originally used on my original website was bespoke. I mean, it's really going to depend on you and your situation, which is why it's hard for me to put something out there that says, well, here's Brigid's 3 steps to how you're going to deal with change and loss. And people have tried to tell me I should write articles and things like that. I'm like, well, that's not a fair representation of what happens there, because these processes are usually, like I said the other day, they're not linear. You're in one place, you feel great today, you don't feel great tomorrow. You're good for a while, then you're not good for a while. And there's no necessarily rhyme or reason for it, or maybe there's just certain environmental things that trigger it. But things keep coming up. It's almost like it's gotten mixed into something, and, as it comes around again, you find the next piece, or you find the next piece. And that's usually how things go. So in any case, I work with people very, very individually in that way. The theme that I wanted to talk about today, when I got up, and I usually sit down and I think, okay, what's going to be the subject that I really want to cover today before I do the daily reading, is the thing that came up for me this morning was security. A lot having to do around security, because I talked yesterday about being overwhelmed, and the security is a theme where, okay, a lot of us want to be in a space where we feel secure financially, where we feel secure in our relationships, right? We don't want to be at odds with people. Generally speaking, I mean, the reality is that sometimes there is somebody who doesn't like what we do, or is, if you're in work and you have a work dynamic, there could be somebody who's a pain or doesn't do what pull their weight in something, or whatever it is. There's always some niggling thing, but basically that your relationships are sound. You're not in bad the bad graces of anybody, and that your physical health is sound, and that you're feeling good. So basically that we all kind of like to feel that secure thing. And a lot of probably to be absolutely 100% perfectly secure is it's not okay. If like anything, it's almost like the state of falling in love with somebody, or having an ecstatic moment, or having something. It's something that you might have for a period of time, and then it eventually things kind of move again, because life is dynamic. Life isn't static. Now you can be secure. How do you be secure in a dynamic situation? Like that, I think, is really what the question is, because life always is changing. And we wake up every day. I mean, we live in a mindset that's causal, cause and effect, or we know, I'm going to get up and do A, and then B is going to be the result. And it can be something very basic. I'm going to get in my car and drive in this direction, and I'm going to end up at work. I'm going to do, or I'm going to expect that at this time of day, traffic is going to be like this. There's certain things that we expect, and when something is outside of that, then it can throw us off. If we're not flexible and we're not adaptable, which, to be fair, a lot of us are not. We just kind of we get into routines and we're going through things. Now, routine doesn't have to be bad. I mean, I think about like monks in a monastery, for instance. I remember years ago when I actually had thought about the possibility of, which might surprise you, of maybe entering a convent or something like that, or spending time in a monastic setting. I have done it for short periods of time, just because it was a place where I could go where I could have absolute silence. I love silent retreats because, in spite of how much I talk, I really actually do like not talking for periods of time. There is something really rejuvenating about not speaking and doing a lot of internal reflection. Although on those retreats, usually they're directed ones, so you do actually speak with somebody. But a lot of those, I mean, I've kind of stopped going to those because a lot of those are biblically based, and I just find that that's not really that's not really where I'm at this point. But there was nothing wrong with them. I wasn't dealing with hardcore evangelical nuns. It was just kind of like, okay, think about this passage and reflect on it, and think about this with respect to your situation. That was their context that they were using. But you had this idea of, but when I had thought about potentially doing that, there was, typically like the Benedictine orders, there's prayer and work, right? And that just sounded nice. Yeah, you have your routine every day. You get up, you have, the matins, your morning prayers, and then you have your, whatever work that is you do. Then you have your lunchtime thing, and then you have, everything is kind of laid out. And there is something kind of nice about that. In one sense, it sounds actually really nice to think, oh, okay, everything's just ordered and laid out for me. But this gets back to the things that I've said about order and the way in which order is what we equate with happiness. Okay, it's what we equate with with pleasure. I mean, because obviously if everything's ordered, if we feel content, or contentment really, maybe even more, it could be happiness, but a lot of times more like it's contentment. I'm just content with where things are. And a lot of us times that's where we want to be, is we just want to be content with where we are and what we have. And routine can help establish something like that. But routine also can be something that traps us as well. We can get involved in routines, and when things start to change, because not all change is sudden. There's a lot of change that's very gradual, but it can be a sudden change. Let's just say you have a routine, you get up and you go to a job every day, and you know what the work dynamic is. It's familiar, it's comfortable. Even if things about your job change every day, you basically know what you're doing and what's going on. I worked at a job. I mean, the field I worked in for 27 years. And by the end of it, I mean, I literally could walk into the office and do my job in my sleep. I mean, no matter what was thrown at me that day. Occasionally I got a curveball, but generally I could do my job in my sleep. And we kind of like that because then it's like, okay, I don't have to go in and be under pressure to really focus really hard all the time. There is something nice about that because obviously if we're talking work-life balance, you want to be in a situation where you don't feel overwhelmed all the time, right? But at the same time, sometimes we get so comfortable in a certain place that when it is time to change, when changes come, and there's really, okay, in the broader sense, there's two kinds of change, the kind you can control and the kind that you can't. And generally what we worry about is the type that we can't. And the kind of change that we can't control usually has to do with, it's just the stuff that happens to us. It's that unexpected stuff that comes in and messes up what our plan was. I was going to make this appointment, but there was an accident and now I'm stuck on the road and I can't get there. It was a sunny day. I mean, well, depending on where you are. In the U.S., this would be more of a problem. I don't think if you lived like in England and Ireland, for instance, that you would have this issue but like if I woke up and the weather report said it's going to be sunny today, and then all of a sudden I go out and it's raining and I'm caught out and I get soaked. And I say that in those places it's like sunny and rainy alternately, between hours. So you just wear a raincoat and get on with it. If it's something that you have one expectation, or you think it's going to be warm and then it's cold out. I mean, those are just really simple things. But we have all these little things that add up during the day, and oftentimes by the end of the day, how we feel is going to be, if we're irritated at the end of the day, it may be because how many things went out of sync with the plan. Okay, this is what we're talking about. How much went out of sync with the plan, and so part of what really fundamentally needs to be learned or unlearned or relearned, depending on where you're coming from, is how well do you deal with unpredictability? How well do you deal when something is thrown your way? That really is part of Zen philosophy, actually. The whole idea of Zen philosophy is that you don't really attach anything to anything. And so every day is new. It's like you get up and the idea of living in the present is, I don't have an expectation of where things are going to be. Whatever happens, happens. There was a story that Alan Watts had told this story. And of course, he talks a lot about Zen philosophy. I always recommend people listen to him because I love Alan Watts and his stuff. But he told a story, and I'm not going to tell it as perfectly as he did. This is just sort of what I remember about it, of a Zen monk who, there was a woman's family who came to him and insisted that the daughter claimed that he had assaulted her, and that she now had a child, and it was his responsibility to take care of it. And he looked at them and he said, "Is that so?" And so they give him this child, and he takes care of the child. He plays with the child, takes care of it, raises it. So then a few years, the child's like maybe 5 or 6 years old now, and the family comes back and they're very apologetic, and they said, "Well, no, actually, she admitted that she'd had an affair with somebody, and she was just trying to not get in trouble for it. So she implicated this man and he hadn't done anything." And they said, "Okay, we're really sorry. We'll take the child back and raise it with our family now." And the monk just said, "Is that so?" And so he gave the child back to them. Now, your first reaction would be, well, this guy didn't do anything. And, your first reaction would be, well, I didn't do anything. Now, I realize in today's world that there'd be a lot more consequences if somebody was accused of something like that. But the idea was that it was just, okay, this is something that hit me. That would be a crisis for somebody, right? And he's just like, "Is that so?" And again, it's not even so much about the specific situation there, because obviously all of us have certain reactions. We all have very strong emotions about things. We should be, that's the thing too, you need to fully express your emotions and allow yourself to be in them and to move through them. But it's a situation where it's like, well, whatever's coming up, it's just like, oh, okay, that's just the next thing. That's the next act in this play. And now you improvise. What are you going to do? How are you going to manage it? And many of us are very, very rigidly anti-change. People who tend to move towards, say, more conservative forms of religion just as a way of example. It doesn't just have to be religion, it can be other things as well. But people who tend to very rigidly talk about this is the way that something is, and that's it, generally are that way because they have a hard time with that unpredictability. They want something to say, no, this is secure, this is reliable, this is what it always is. That's why people will read the Bible, for instance, like it's an instruction manual, which it's not what it's meant to be. But people will read it that way and think like, no, well, the Bible says this, so this must be what it is. And of course, that's always very selective because the Bible says many, many contradictory things all the time. And again, I'm not, and by the way, people who adhere to the Bible, I'm not dissing the Bible. I'm just simply saying it's generally the way people try to read it is not the way texts like that were meant to be read. I have a whole thing that I talk about on my other channel about what, history versus myth and what those words originally mean and what their connections are. And generally, the stories that are told are not meant to be entirely, we think now of something literal, we think of something like that as being factual. These are the facts of things. It's like, no, it's not meant to be factual. It never was meant to be factual. It kind of brings in the idea of the zeitgeist. So you're bringing in all nuances of being. You're bringing in not only maybe something that might be a true historical event, but you might also be bringing in allegory. You're bringing in beliefs. You're bringing in how the culture is interpreting something in that archetypal way, or even might be through their own numinous experience. I mean, you can't say from something thousands of years ago what people thought, right, or what their motivation was. But sacred texts tend to come out of that, and sacred texts were not a thing really until probably. Like I said, around the time of Greek philosophy, 300-400s BCE is like the first time you start seeing what they call hydros gamos, the first time you start seeing sacred texts. But people who really cling to a text and say, or a doctrine, people who are very, very dogma and doctrine driven and very rule driven, like the Romans were very much like that. People who are very rule driven are people who have a hard time dealing with change. And so a lot of times, there's a card in this deck, the Queen of Clouds, and the Queen of Clouds has to do with it has to do with morality. It's called the morality card, and often it will tell you need to drop your morals. Now, for some people, they're thinking like, well, drop my morals. Like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean going out and going crazy and doing all these excessive things? Well, no. Dropping your morals means dropping your judgments, dropping all the rules that you feel that you have to follow because somehow you believe that's the script and that's what you have to do. And the more you feel the need to adhere to a script and the more uncomfortable you are when somebody says, hey, there's here's a shift, here's a change in plot that has nothing to do with your script. People don't really know how to manage that. And that's a major kind of a thing. And that's often the biggest stumbling block to transitions, because people will say they have a belief about either themselves or about a situation that they're just like, well, no, that's not negotiable. That's the way it is. And, when somebody says that to you, you kind of go, okay, well, just so you know, this is the one thing, this is the one thing you might want to work on. But if you're not ready to work on it, then you're not ready to work on it. But, at some point, as I've often said, if people don't change on their own, sometimes these things happen because it is time for you to change. It's time for you to grow. If you are moving towards a better thing or towards, whatever the next path is for you, your course will change over the time. So it's not going to be just like your life is not just one straight line. And Joseph Campbell had said, if your life is a straight line and everything goes along perfectly and you never have problems and, everything goes boom, boom, boom and falls into place right from day one, then you're probably living somebody else's life. That's what he said. Because that's the question. Because at some point, as you get older, when you're younger, you may be trying to establish yourself. You may be wanting to be more socially acceptable. You may want to do the things like, well, this is the responsible adult thing to do, and so on and so forth. When you get past a certain age, a lot of people try to talk about the midlife crisis, and sometimes the midlife crisis can take these rather extreme manifestations. But typically speaking, it's just, no, you just reached a point where you're like, wait, is this the person who I really am? And that's a major transition that occurs, at which point you may walk away from a career you've been in for years. You may You may start thinking about things or focusing on things that you did not focus on when you were younger, that were not part of your identity. So those things change, and just it's very natural for those things to change, but it can be cataclysmic for people depending on what their circumstances are. I've already taken up a half an hour, and I've not done this reading yet, so let's do it now. So what's our reading today for, just general reading for viewers. What do we need here? Okay. Ooh, interesting. And this is funny because there's a lot of 4 energy in here, and I'm talking about security and stability, and the 4s in the tarot are the cards of stability. They're cards of staying put, staying where you are. So that's really interesting. Now, okay, our first card here is the 7 of Rainbows, and I really like this interpretation of it. This is the Patience card. And as you can see, it's the pregnant woman who is waiting for the time for something to be born. Yeah, isn't this a great card? And because the 7 of Pentacles is often interpreted, there's 2 ways. People either interpret it as, it's usually a reevaluation card, like, is this worth putting the effort into? Okay, that's the way people tend to see this card. But I've often seen this as a card of patience, saying you've been cultivating something, you just haven't gotten to the result yet. And that's what this card is really about. So if we're talking about having patience with something, there's the idea here that I feel like people might be in a state of waiting to see, there's certainly with what's been going on astrologically, a lot of people have felt like they're on the edge of a transition. The eclipses have broken a lot of things open for people. If it doesn't make major changes, maybe it's been major revelations, maybe you've learned things about people or situations. It's different for everybody what they experienced with that energy, but I don't think I've talked to a single person who didn't have some kind of a shakeup or a revelation or epiphany or something in connection with that energy. But it's almost like, patience is kind of like you're on that edge there. Like you're putting the work in and you're like, is this work going anywhere? But it's really the idea that you are still, carrying this to term, so to speak. You're waiting for something to be born. Now, the inner feeling of which we're unaware is the Queen of Wands energy, which is sharing. It's interesting. Every time I look at this card, I want to think Queen of Pentacles, just because of the way she's holding like this almost, this it's almost like a cornucopia type thing, where it's like, you're showing the abundance. But sharing here is somebody who is, that's the inner feeling, having enough to share. And what comes into my head is voice, like people having their voice, wanting to have their voices heard, expressing themselves authentically, like we're saying. Sharing is about, this is the gifts I have and I'm sharing them with you. This is something that internally, that's the thing that you are trying to get to. Like, how well are you going to be able to share with others what it is you're trying to get across or what you're trying to express. But here's the external feeling. And this is the 4 of Pentacles. In this deck, it is called the Miser. And I always think this is kind of a harsh card, but it's the idea of this person who's saying, like, okay, 4 of Pentacles is generally the idea. It could be read 2 ways. It can be read as you're clinging to something too tightly, and in order for you to have abundance, you really need to let go and not just scrape and hang on to what you've got. The other interpretation is that you are trying to establish stability. So right now you are putting up a wall or a barrier, or just saying, whoa, I don't want to overspend, or I need to be careful with what I do with my energy. It's like you're being somewhat frugal with that. But this is saying, like, okay, you have a lot to share, don't hold it back. Okay? That's what this card is about. Like, what you have to share with others, don't hold it back. Don't build a wall around yourself because you feel that you need to, that somehow, because I think in the book what this would say is, like, ask yourself why you need a fortress around you. And that's a lot of the problem, because we want to express ourselves and be who we are, but we also live in a world, the world of social media, people can be very cruel, it can be very tribal, people have very strong opinions, which they don't have any difficulty telling you, and if you don't have that kind of inner confidence to just kind of say, okay, well, this is just the world, this is what it is, you could feel very much like you need to pull back and say, well, I'm not going to share my voice now because I might get hurt. Somebody's going to wound me. Especially if you're bringing something forward that's very, very personal or something. You will find people who support you, but if you have people who try to trash you or try to criticize you or something like that, then that doesn't, that can really make you turn around and say, well, fine, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. I can tell you it's the way I lived for many years. If I felt like I was, because I had gone through some really difficult periods when I was younger, of just for no reason at all, just feeling like I was just put upon by everybody, or disliked by groups of people, or whatever, and it wasn't really doing anything. But it also, I look back on it and I say, yeah, well, that's just developmental, that's just age, that's kind of like your ordeal or your initiation of that time period. Now I think they try to do a lot more to try to curb stuff like that, which I don't know. I don't like the idea that people go through it, but at the same time, I don't know. It just seems like everybody kind of has their initiation, so to speak. And if nothing else, you take out of that later, unfortunately, on the negative side, it can traumatize you. On the positive side, it might make you, again, not everything going according to plan. Not everything is resilient. So sometimes when our security is disrupted, we're trying to build a wall around it and say, no, I've got to try to, I've got to be safe. I've got to hide away and be safe. So that may be something that we maybe feel like we want to do in the face of this kind of unpredictability as we're waiting for things to happen, and as we're because when you're in a state of waiting, you're really unsure about what the outcome's going to be. And that's the other piece of it, is that we always want to know, we want to predict what the outcome is, and we don't know what the outcome is. We never know. That's why even with the cards, there could be an outcome that comes out for now, and something could change, and it's a different outcome. So our card here is Beyond Illusion. This is the advice. And Beyond Illusion is the Judgment card. So the idea is that, so whatever's going on here, it's like saying you need to make this decision. You are not in a state where you are deceiving yourself anymore. You're not in a state where, whatever this is that you want to share, that what you're sharing is let's just say right or true, even if it's just for you, or even if it's just for the people who end up being your audience. So it's saying you're beyond illusion. Don't allow yourself, we can sometimes tell ourselves stories to make us say, well, yeah, but it's better that I just stay here, or this is going to be a repeat of that. Like I said, we do causal things. We say, oh, well, the last time I put myself out in this situation, this thing happened. So if I put myself out there, it's going to happen again. So I'm just going to forestall it and not do it. And again, depending on the situation, but if it has to do with us expressing ourselves, then we need to just understand that our judgment is good here. We are clear. We're not operating from a place of illusion or of self-deception. And the outcome is another 4. And this is the interpretation of the 4 of Cups. And this is called the Turning In card. Now, as you see, there's the woman sitting in meditation. There's almost kind of this watery element here. And around her are all these kinds of phantom-like faces that are yelling at her. But she looks very, very serene, because she's listening, she's turning in and listening to her inner voice. She's grounding, she's centering, and saying, I know I'm beyond illusion. And I know that what I'm trying to do here is the right thing to do. And again, maybe if there's a result that isn't coming yet, that you need to be patient regarding. But it's saying don't listen to the outer critics. Focus on what your inner voice is telling you. And oftentimes that is achieved through meditation, or just through having quiet time, or just not, and when we're too busy all the time, when we're in these kinds of routines where we are busy all the time, then we're not giving ourselves time to hear that inner voice. Okay, so even if we have a moment where we're going through emotions that are maybe not our favorite ones, oftentimes these are moments of potential breakthrough. So definitely, the message here definitely seems to be about, being patient, waiting for certain transformations or changes to occur, having something to share, maybe feeling like you're going to hold back, or maybe you're self-doubting and maybe I should hold back, but you're beyond illusion. So don't listen to external critics who are telling you not to do something, or don't worry about these kind of phantom voices that may come up and maybe disagree with something that you do or that you say or whatever, because you are kind of rooted in your own truth here. So So that's what I have for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Today is Mother's Day in the USA, so anybody who celebrates Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day to you or to your mother or to whomever. I know I'm going out this afternoon for Mother's Day for my own mom, and so I'm going to probably post this video on YouTube. I'm also working on my tarot videos. So I've done Libra, Scorpio, and Sag, and I've just got to finish Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and those are going to all be uploaded for tomorrow. So those will be on the channel along with the recording of this as well. And of course, this recording is here on Instagram if you've missed any part of it. So so thank you again so much for joining me. Have a wonderful Sunday and a wonderful start to your week. And of course, I will be here tomorrow morning. So take care. Bye-bye.